All right. Well, it's spring and we are refreshing. And literally, Alex, you are refreshing.
Well, I'm trying. We can say that. I am trying. I will say the year of COVID has been a year where we have been at home and we have tried in our house to do some refresh throughout the year. I mean, we painted a lot. We got new carpet in part of our house. We got some new furniture. We got new floors, but the whole house didn't get refreshed. And I'm not kidding. I've spent so much time in this house that
Mhm.
there are some spaces that are driving me bonkers and I can't seem to get unstuck in them. And so, my lovely friend, Krista, is a home coach and she has been home coaching me. And this has been so amazing because I think we should just stop for a minute and talk to our listeners a little bit about how we may be wired differently.
Okay, do it.
So, on the Strengths Finder, you and I have four of the same five, top five. We actually used to be 5 for 5, but I dropped responsibility, and that may say something. I don't know. But it really surprised us when
Mhm.
we took that evaluation a few years ago and looked at the results and thought, we would never say we are the same. And so we can have really similar strengths according to that particular assessment tool and still be really different people.
Mhm.
And that assessment tool doesn't happen to assess, are you a visual person? Are you, how do you feel about your space? How about creativity? What about perfectionism? It doesn't address any of those things. And we are really different in all of those areas. And so I think people can probably guess how you're wired based on the fact that you are a home coach, that you like and are maybe a little more organized than I am, that your home, your physical space is a little bit more of your focus than it is mine. And the truth is, I like being in a nice space. I like it. I like walking into a wonderfully decorated or uncluttered room. I just really struggle with how to get to that point.
Yeah.
And I even struggle with what do I like? Like, I don't know. Like, show me a picture in a magazine. Sure. I like that. I don't. So but you have really strong opinions on things like that. Where I'm anything that looks nice, I'm like, oh, that looks nice. Yeah, I'd want to be in that space. So we just are wired really differently. And I live in my head probably more than you do.
Yep.
And you work things out in the tactile. So that is going to be very evident as we talk through how you have been coaching me. And maybe as my coach slash therapist, you can tell me how, or you can tell our listeners how you approached this situation when I said, I want to work on some things in my home as a coaching place for us to begin. What was your approach or your thoughts, knowing me and knowing maybe some of my own struggles with stuff?
Well, I think, I mean, knowing you, I came in with some background, but a lot of my clients, I don't have that background. So I was at a little bit of an advantage with you, and I felt like we could move a little faster. But, the first step is always understanding the why behind anything. So for you, for example, I knew that some of the organizational pieces in your home were overwhelming. And so I automatically was coming in really asking the question, let's get to underneath that. Why is it overwhelming for you? What does it feel like for you? So maybe you can just answer that for the listeners and you can tell them a little bit about what you told me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I didn't necessarily have like a real quick spot on answer. I'm pretty self aware. And so I think I could answer some of this off the bat, but some of it I discovered as we were talking and as I was working through some things. So I'll say my first why and why I even wanted to work on this is because I do believe that a peaceful space helps create a peaceful home. And so I believe that 100%, even if I'm not really great at maintaining it or creating it, I know that that is true. And so for the sake of my family and for the sake of my own mental health, I would like things to be a little more streamlined and not so cluttery. So the things I personally struggle with are piles of stuff, papers, for example. What do I do with the second grader's drawing of Martin Luther King that I know I want to keep, but I have 476 of them already? And so it sits on my desk for a month.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be an example of me getting overwhelmed with the decision of what to do with it. And then it creates clutter. And then the clutter creates mental stress, maybe not conscious, maybe conscious, but maybe just unconscious stress. So I will also say that I have a lot of, this is a big word, but I'll use it, a lot of shame around this, because I feel like as a good mom, I should be able to maintain a home that feels peaceful and lovely and perfectly put together all the time. And I live with 6 people who are people who pick things up and move them around, or don't pick things up that I think they should pick up. And so just the reality of living with people, but also just the reality that I maybe am not starting from a great baseline myself. So that has been an issue, I think, my whole mothering. And I even have a whole section on Loving My Actual Life about it, about how this is my struggle. Like I'm happy to make dinner. I don't care about, I mean, I like to cook, but it makes a mess. I don't care. I don't mind a mess. Right. Like, but I can put up with a lot of noise and chaos with my kids. That's maybe the benefit of this kind of wiring. I don't get mad when my kids make a mess. Well, until I get mad, but often I can tolerate what other people can't. And then that's how we end up. So those are the strengths in that. So I just kind of want to lay that. So I knew that my struggle was with stuff, decisions around things, and then that creates kind of a chaotic environment. So my hope was, how can we picked my laundry room because that tends to be a place where I put a lot of things I don't know what to do with. How can I manage these things and create a space where I'm not just ignoring stuff? Because I'm starting to get a little bit in the underneath and realizing I am avoiding this because I am going to have to make some hard decisions. And so I would continue to pile things on top of my washer and dryer that I wanted to avoid dealing with. And that can get really deep and really dark really fast. Okay, people. But not that I was getting deep and dark around my towels, but just it was bringing up some other things about, oh, this might be a pattern of behavior that isn't just reflected in my physical space, but in my emotional space as well. And that's where I say home coach / therapist, because we got real in some things.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and that's typical. I mean, I think that is, usually when we break that down, it gets to some of those deeper ways of operating in the world that maybe we need to look at. And so it's not just that, I have chaos in this particular space. It's that maybe there's some ways of operating that I avoid. There's some things that I avoid emotionally. Maybe just discomfort is hard for me. And so that's why, there's lots of things we can dig underneath. And then once that surfaces, you can call it out and talk to it. And not that maybe you're going to, you can literally talk to it, which I think is actually very helpful. It's a good technique. But even recognizing it and saying, oh, that's this tendency coming out. And so either I need to set the task up for success against that tendency, which you and I actually did on our very first session with each other. Or secondly, I need to talk back to that voice and I'm not going to listen to it and I'm going to do something about it. And so there's, a couple of different ways that you can really move forward. And the best way to move forward is knowing what actually is your obstacle. What is that thing that is preventing you from moving forward? Because once you know it and you can call it out, then it moves out of the way and then you can step forward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we started talking. I mean, we used the laundry room as the starting place, and that took us all over the house. But it was a tangible space that we could say, okay, what's the problem here? And how are we going to tackle it? And I think what I quickly realized is that my perfectionism prevents me from starting sometimes, because I want there to be a right answer in a right way. And I'm looking at something and I know there's not going to be a right answer or a right way. And so I get overwhelmed with that feeling. And then I just don't even deal with it. And so often I think people would assume somebody with some perfectionist tendencies would have a very put together space, and be very type A. But I know this about myself, and I've heard this about other people, that we can sometimes, because we want to do it right. And this is where you and I may be a little different. Krista's really good about saying, let's just try something. And in my heart, I'm like, I don't want to just try something. I want to be successful at something. I don't want to say, I don't want to say anything until I know it's a for sure. Like, I don't even want to say what I want sometimes. I mean, see, we're getting kind of deep and dark here. So that pile on top of the dryer can start to represent that tendency that I have of, I'm not going to know what to do with these things. And so I'm just going to walk away because I'm overwhelmed at just trying. That to me sounds like I'm going to have to let go of a lot of expectations. What did we say, Krista? I want an A+ in everything I do. And there's not going to be an A+. I'm not going to get an A+ in this. So I don't want to attempt it.
Well, and I thought that was literally like a groundbreaking revelation. And I wasn't sure if you were going to share it on here. And I'm glad you did, because it really is important, because what it did was it allowed us then to structure your steps forward to address that. It allowed us to say, okay, knowing this, what is actually a plan that's going to work for you? And that's why home coaching is so unique and individual to each person, because what works for me is not going to work for you, and it's not going to work for the next person, right? And so we have to know ourselves and then say, okay, for me, I need, in your situation, I need to set myself up for success. So I need to do it this way, which, why don't you share what set you up for success against that perfectionistic tendency?
Yeah. So one thing I realized is I get overwhelmed about maybe the scope of the job, or it may take me longer than I think I have time for, or it just may take longer than I schedule for. And then I'm not going to get an A+, right? And of course, I'm not thinking those thoughts in my head. No. Like, I'm not thinking I'm not going to get an A+, but when I really pause and think, okay, what's my fear? So what if I don't finish? Who cares? Well, turns out I care. So that I could go into it saying, I'm not going to finish. I'm only going to work on this for 20 minutes a day. And that's my goal. So I'm going to get an A+ and not finishing. Right?
Totally. We set it up so your goal, no matter what you did, if you spent 20 minutes, it was A+.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. That the 20 minutes was where I was going to get the A+. Mm-hmm. So it was a little bit of reframing, like, what's my actual project? My project wasn't to clean stuff off the dryer. My project was to spend 20 minutes on it. And then I could feel successful in it. And so that was helpful. The other thing I realized is, I know consciously that part of the issue is, all this stuff may have some designated places that are also a disaster in my house, like closets. Let's just name it closet. So it meant that in order for me to do one thing, I needed to go and do something else first. And that was helpful. That wasn't a revelation. I knew I needed to say that out loud, but it was helpful to have somebody, you, say, okay, so how's that going to get done? And the accountability factor and making a plan on how I needed to do some pre-work in order to address the stated problem. Because we were meeting again in a week, and you helped me come up with a plan. It was a really awesome plan that really worked. And then that allowed me to feel successful. And by having some success, I felt like that was propelling me forward to maybe deal with some of the harder things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I guess one of the questions I have for you, and I think this is good to talk about on this series, is as we're looking at our homes and kind of for spring, just really trying to get reorganized, especially with COVID. I feel like we've lived in our spaces so much that we start to ignore things. And we do that anyway, but I think especially during COVID, we've just kind of ignored things. And now we're like, oh, that box has been there for 9 months. So can you speak to a little bit of, was it as complicated as you thought to get it
No.
done?
No. Okay. So we're going to give a little example of a project I had to do in order to get the laundry room project done. So I have another closet in my house that was a disaster. Can we just say it was? And we are going to post the pictures.
We are?
Yeah.
That
The
is,
shame. I'm gonna break the chains.
bring it to light. Bring it to light.
Because the end picture, the after picture is amazing.
It is.
So that's always easier, right? To show the before picture when you've got the after picture to show. So this one closet needed to be dealt with. I mean, it's a closet where I cannot believe things didn't come tumbling down out of the closet every time I opened the door. It looked like an avalanche of stuff. It just was awful, just completely awful. So I knew that needed to be dealt with in order to put some of the things that were on the dryer waiting for that closet to be done, to be put away. And so you helped me come up with a really manageable plan. I recruited one of my children, who actually is an incredible organizer, to help me. I paid her money, which I don't do that often because I get kind of cranky, like, we should all be pitching in. Why am I paying you? Nobody's paying me to do this. That kind of attitude. Well, that doesn't really motivate teenagers. So this was a motivator. She was motivated to get it done. I said, let's do it sometime this week, because I had a call with Krista where I was going to have to say, I got this done. And so having that double accountability was really helpful. But it ended up really not being that hard. It did help me to have somebody standing next to me who was like, okay, let's do this. Like, she doesn't get overwhelmed in the same way that I do. And we came up with a plan. We got to pull everything out. Then I'll go through everything. I'll make decisions, which isn't that hard for me. The decision part actually isn't that hard for me. And then she put everything back that went back in there. And then I had the decision of, okay, what about all this stuff I want to keep, but it doesn't live here? And you gave me some good principles as far as what gets to go back in there. I kept talking about prime real estate. This is prime real estate. It's a closet right off of the dining room table. I want things that have to do with the dining room table to be in here. And so that gave me some guideposts too on what gets to be in here. So that combination of having accountability and then a plan was really helpful. And then also, and I know you say this a lot, but I just don't do it a lot, scheduling it. So it was on my schedule. It was on my daughter's schedule. That helped make it happen because we were both motivated to use a certain chunk of time that was set aside to do that. So that was helpful. Did I answer that question? I kind of forget what the question was.
And I think you said a couple of things that I want to pull out. And one is this idea that I do this all the time, is I will actually schedule someone to help me with something, because the reason I'm scheduling them is because if I schedule them, I'll block time out to do it in my
Mm-hmm.
schedule. And I don't always do that if I'm just working by myself. And so that external motivation is powerful. It works and it's a good trick. So if you, like, I even, have hired, even though I have teenagers, if they're too busy to have that chunk of time, I literally have hired a neighbor to come who's in her teens and to come help me because she had the time. She had already graduated and she had more time. And so I'm like, come help me. And it was fantastic. And she was amazing. So that's a good trick. And then the second thing you mentioned that I do want to draw out is this idea of prime real estate. And that is just a term that I use to say what deserves this space. And are you letting something live in prime real estate that really shouldn't be living there? It really needs to be downgraded. And so, how can you really look at your space in that way and say, okay, in this closet, this is what belongs here. This is what deserves to be here. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that is just a helpful tool to use as you're making, like you said, making decisions.
Yeah, it even helped me determine where in the closet things got to be, because this is a very funky shaped over the stairs. It's got steps and it's deep. And so I could put some things at the back of the closet that I wanted in there, but that we only use 3 or 4 times a year. But the stuff I use every week is right next to the door. So even within the closet, it helped me determine what's prime real estate in here and how do things get allocated based on use. And I explained it to my daughter and she got it. And we both easily could determine, oh, yes, oh, no, this doesn't get to be right here. So
Mm-hmm.
was just a very helpful, practical tool.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, I mean, moving forward, what would you say you've learned by coaching that has been a little bit of a discovery process for you and how you operate and work?
Well, I know that many of the things I said out loud, I knew already in my head or intuitively. But when I had to articulate them to you, like you asked me a very direct question and I had to answer it honestly, saying it out loud a little bit took the power away. Like, okay, so why is that such a scary thing? And then two, made me pause and think, okay, I know that's true about me, but I just need to sit with the reality that that's true about me for a minute. And then could have a week to kind of think through how I am seeing that truth play out in my everyday experiences. So I think really having somebody that was asking me pointed questions, which you're very good at doing, and then me having to really process honestly, because there's no point in me using your time and using my time to process if I'm not going to be honest. But the truth was, some of the stuff I was saying, I didn't really like about myself, but it helped to be honest, to be able to say, okay, now that I've said it, now how are we going to move forward with the big why of I want to create a little more peace in my home so that everyone isn't carrying this additional stress from the environment. So I think that was really helpful. And then also I know about myself. I mean, I'm a writer. I work on deadline. If I create my own deadline, it's pointless. I mean, it really is. I am a person who has time, apps on my phone that limit my screen time on certain apps. I have control on those. And so it makes no difference to me that I have these time limitations. So I need I need the editor that's saying the deadline is tomorrow. I need you saying, what did you do this week? And we're meeting again in a week to help motivate me. I wish I was different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. And so I need to work within how I'm wired. And that's a little bit too of the whole process of recognizing what is.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a lot of storage for my kitchen stuff. That's part of my issue. I could complain about it, or we can figure out a way to work around it. But more importantly, I am wired towards certain tendencies. That doesn't mean I can't change. Doesn't mean that I can't do things that are hard for me. But recognizing my tendencies is going to set up systems that I think are going to make me more successful in the long run. And so that was something I really appreciated about you, is that you were like, well, if that's not going to work, let's not even consider that as an option, even though this may be a common solution.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't really ever say, why isn't this going to work for you? You didn't try to force my square peg into the round hole. You just said, okay, well, then let's move on and let's figure out, knowing that it's not going to work and the why of why it's not going to work. That will help us come up with what will work.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was helpful in the process.
Yeah, and I think that is actually the beauty of coaching, is that it's, like I said before, it's tailored, but what's great about it is that you discover, oh, no, like this would work for me or this wouldn't. And only you live in your skin, only you live in your life. And so only you can really determine what's going to work for you. But what I can do is I can come alongside of you, ask you good questions that help you to really think about that, and then also help propel you forward by helping you create systems that will work according to your family personality and some of those things that we talk about. And so that to me, and that's why, I mean, I will always be in a coaching relationship because I need that. I need people to ask me those questions. I need, and for you and me, we're going to, maybe if we're both talking about the home, we're going to address different things, but I need it just as much as you need it, even though it's my strength. You know, it's just because we all have things, the ways that we operate, and we can all grow. And that growth process is actually what I'm personally most committed to, is I want to be someone who's always growing. And so a part of that is having someone come alongside of me and help me with that. And so that to me is just the beauty of coaching right there.
Yeah. Well, it's been really helpful, and we're not done.
We're not done. No,
we
we are not done.
still have some things that I am working on. But it has been fun to have some successes, to be able to say, okay, I did that. And it's been hanging over my head. I knew if I tried really hard, I could probably do it. But having that external motivation, but also having a separate set of eyes and a different brain that processes things differently, to look at what I see as a problem and have some options as far as solutions, was really, really helpful.
Mm-hmm. Well, way to refresh for spring, Alex.
That's right.
I'm so proud of you. You're doing it. You're doing the work. I'm so proud of you. You're making time for it.
Oh, well, thank you. And thank you for your guidance in it. And I just want to say to the person, woman who's listening, who thinks, I am just so frustrated with kind of the organizing. Here's 10 hot tips. Here's sometimes I laugh, actually, when I'm looking at pictures of like people's systems. I'm like, oh my gosh, that would never work. And if you just feel like, what is wrong with me, in that I don't think like all of these very organized people who give organization tips, that it is okay. And that, again, I started with some strengths that I have, that a little bit of my ability to manage chaos, I think, does offer some strengths to my family.
Mm-hmm.
But also too, just that maybe looking at those top 10 lists isn't going to be what's most helpful to you. Maybe it is hiring somebody like Krista, or inviting a friend over that has a different set of eyes. I think you have to be really okay with showing those yucky parts of your home that you're not super comfortable with. I mean, that drawer or whatever it is that you're wanting to organize, someone has to see it. You have to invite them in. And that could be the hardest part and the hardest barrier. So this is my word of encouragement from the woman who is not naturally bent towards home organization, that I feel you. I totally do. And if you have a why, a bigger why that is propelling you to do it, that there can be ways that you can make it work for you that don't look like Real Simple magazine, which I always roll my eyes at that magazine because nothing they have in there is really simple. It's always like, oh, really simple, complicated plans, but okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm all for, use each other's strengths. I mean, we're the sisterhood. Mm-hmm. And so, Alex and I are wired, like she said, we're wired differently. And so I can use some of my strengths on her behalf, and she can use some of hers on my behalf. And you can do that in your home. I mean, invite a friend over who's good at it and say, help me, and then I'll come help you do this, whatever she needs and what isn't her strength. And so, that's where we, I think, as a sisterhood can also really help each other.
Yeah. Okay.
All
well,
right.
I have a little something I want to read over our listeners. This is from the book Every Moment Holy by McKelvey. I don't know what the first name is. The last name is Douglas Kane McKelvey. And this is a book of prayers and blessings and liturgies for every moment of our lives. And they have a section on ordinary work, is what they call it, and labor and vocation. And this is a liturgy for laundering. So we will close with this. May I recall in this needful parable of soil and rags, of soap and water and cleansing, the work which you have done for your people, O Christ, and the work which you are now doing in me. Even as the waters are agitated and churned, stir by your Holy Spirit my heart and memory and conscience. Open my eyes to see my own faults, my own weaknesses, the harms I have caused and the griefs I have inflicted. Not so that I would sit in impassible guilt, but so that I would be stirred to fresh repentance, to the making of amends where amends can be made, and to prayer and trust that your Spirit might cleanse those things which I have stained by my own selfishness, bitterness, jealousy, pride, or impatience. Even as I draw the freshly laundered clothes from the basin, may the sight and the scent of a new cleanness remind me of the righteousness that is now mine, of the ongoing forgiveness that you extend, of your work on my behalf, which is both finished and forever ongoing and necessary in this life. In Christ, you have declared me righteous, yet by your Spirit, I pray you would ever continue to cleanse me, sanctifying me that my aroma day to day and week to week might be more and more like that of Christ.
Amen.
Amen. The holy work of laundry.
The holy work of laundry.